There's a peculiar cruelty in watching someone celebrate your suffering. Not with words, those can be controlled, measured, performed. But with a smile. The kind that flickers across a face when they believe no one is watching. When they think you're helpless. When they think you cannot see. In the heart of Lagos, inside a pristine hospital room overlooking the restless city, a man named Adebayo learned a truth that would reshape everything he believed about love. The doctors had just delivered their verdict: permanent blindness. A collision on the Ikoyi Expressway 3 days prior had stolen his sight, or so everyone believed. But here's what the doctors didn't know, what his fiancée didn't know, what no one in that room understood: his vision had already returned. And in that first moment of restored sight, when Adebayo could finally see again, he witnessed something that shattered him far more than any accident ever could. His fiancée smiled. Not the tender, sympathetic expression of a devoted partner facing hardship together. No, this was different. This was a relief. This was satisfying. This was the smile of someone whose plan was falling perfectly into place. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Adebayo had built his fortune the way most self-made men do, through relentless work, calculated risks, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. At 38, he owned commercial properties across Victoria Island, held equity in 3 tech startups, and commanded respect in rooms where respect was currency. He understood numbers, contracts, market dynamics. What he didn't understand, what he'd never quite mastered, was reading the human heart. He'd met Folklore at a charity fundraiser 9 months earlier. She'd been radiant that evening, moving through the crowd with practiced grace, her conversation intelligent, her interest in his work genuine, or so it seemed. She'd asked thoughtful questions about his business philosophy, laughed at his stories, touched his arm with just the right amount of warmth. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Within months, engaged. His friends had raised quiet concerns. Too fast, they'd said. Too perfect. But Adebayo dismissed their worries as cynicism. He'd finally found someone who understood his ambitions, who wanted to build a life alongside him, who looked at him with what he believed was love. He'd been so busy seeing what he wanted to see that he'd become blind long before the accident. Now, lying in that hospital bed, maintaining the fiction of his blindness, Adebayo understood that sometimes the most devastating losses have nothing to do with what we can no longer see. Sometimes they're about finally seeing what was always there. The first days of his performance were instructive in ways he hadn't anticipated. Adebayo discovered that pretending to be helpless revealed truths that confidence and capability had always obscured. People spoke differently around someone they believed couldn't see them. They moved differently. They revealed themselves. Folklore transformed almost immediately. The tender touches became perfunctory. The concerned expressions, which he glimpsed through carefully slitted eyes behind dark glasses, never quite reached her voice. She began taking phone calls in adjacent rooms, speaking in lowered tones that nonetheless carried through walls. She laughed. Actually laughed, during conversations she thought he couldn't hear, her voice bright with an excitement that had never been directed toward him. His closest friend Emeka visited daily, playing the role of concerned confidant while quietly documenting everything Adebayo observed. Together, they began pulling threads, investigating the woman Adebayo had planned to marry. What they discovered felt like archaeology of betrayal, layer upon layer of deception, each more elaborate than the last. Folklore had researched him long before that charity gala. She'd studied his business holdings, his investment patterns, his family relationships. The chance meeting had been choreographed. The whirlwind romance had been calculated. Every intimate conversation, every shared dream, every moment he treasured as genuine connection, all of it had been performance. She'd been studying him while he'd been falling in love. But there was more. Folklore had a partner, a business associate of Adebayo's named Kunal, a man who'd been trying to acquire one of Adebayo's most valuable properties for years. They'd been coordinating for months, planning how to transfer assets, forge documents, establish legal control. The accident had been unexpected, but Folklore had adapted quickly, seeing opportunity in catastrophe. Within a week of returning home, Folklore introduced a new element to their household, a private caretaker. Someone to help with Adebayo's adjustment, she'd explained. Someone to ensure his safety and comfort. The caretaker was Kunnel. If you're still watching, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing you powerful stories every week. The audacity of it took Adebayo's breath away. His rival, his fiancée's co-conspirator, perhaps even her lover, was now in his home daily, moving through his space, touching his belongings, all under the guise of helping him. They must have felt invincible, he thought. They must have believed him completely broken. Adebayo's penthouse became a stage. Hidden cameras, installed by Emeka's security team during a fabricated doctor's appointment, captured everything. The recordings revealed a relationship far more intimate than business partnership. They revealed conversations about offshore accounts, about legal guardianship petitions, about doctors willing to testify to diminished capacity. They revealed something else too, discussions about what would happen after the assets were transferred. Discussions about medication errors. About tragic accidents that befall vulnerable people. They were planning to kill him. The revelation didn't arrive as shock but as a strange, cold clarity. Of course they were. He was an obstacle to wealth they believed they'd already earned through their months of manipulation. Once they had legal control, once the money was secured, he would become unnecessary. Dangerous, even. Better to have a brief, tragic marriage followed by a convenient widowhood than years of maintaining an exhausting fiction. Folklore began pushing for an immediate wedding. Small ceremony, she insisted. Intimate. Just close friends, though notably, none of Adebayo's actual close friends or family were included on her carefully curated guest list. The date she chose fell on the same weekend as the scheduled guardianship hearing. She was building a legal fortress around him, brick by brick, ensuring that when the end came, she would be positioned as the grieving wife who tried everything to save her disabled husband. The morning of the wedding, Adebayo woke before dawn and made a decision. He would let the performance continue to its final act. Not because he wanted to marry Folklore, that relationship had died the moment he saw her smile at his blindness. But because he needed the truth documented completely, irrefutably, in a way that would protect not just himself but anyone else she might target in the future. Emeka had already prepared legal protections, a prenuptial agreement filed without Folklore's knowledge, asset transfers to secure trusts, documentation of every fraudulent conversation, and forged signature. The police were ready. Attorneys stood by. Everything was in place. But Adebayo had added one element his friend hadn't anticipated. He'd invited his family. His mother, sister, cousins, everyone Folklore had carefully excluded from the ceremony. They would arrive early, filling the small chapel with witnesses who actually cared about him. People who would see clearly, who couldn't be manipulated or threatened into silence. The ceremony began exactly as Folklore had orchestrated. The small church, the carefully selected guests who knew about the schemes or could be counted on not to ask questions. She walked down the aisle in white, beautiful and radiant, looking every bit like a devoted bride rather than an architect of murder. Adebayo stood at the altar in his dark glasses, Emeka beside him, and waited. The priest moved through the ceremony with practiced rhythm. The readings, the prayers, the beginning of the vows. Everything proceeded according to Folklore's perfect plan. Then came the moment. If anyone has a reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. Adebayo reached up and removed his sunglasses. The silence that followed felt geological, ancient, and absolute. Folklore's face transformed through a cascade of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, terror. Around them, her guests began murmuring, uncertain what they were witnessing. But Adebayo's family remained quiet, watching with the stillness of people who already knew this story's ending. I have reason, Adebayo said, his voice carrying through the chapel with perfect clarity. Several, actually. He watched Folklore struggle to recalibrate, to find some explanation, some way to salvage the situation. But there was nowhere left to hide. He'd seen everything. I've been able to see since the day after the accident, he continued. I saw you smile when they said I'd be permanently blind. I heard you were planning with Colonel. I watched you forge documents at my desk. I know about the offshore accounts, the guardianship petition, the doctors you bribed. I know about the medication you were planning to use. I know everything, Folklore. I've seen who you really are. The arrests happened quickly after that. Folklore, Colonel, the complicit doctors, the attorney who'd prepared fraudulent guardianship documents, all taken into custody as evidence Emeka had compiled was presented to authorities who'd been standing by. The case was overwhelming. The recordings, the forged documents, the conspiracy that had been so carefully documented over weeks of Adebayo's performance. There would be no easy escape, no quick settlement. Justice, for once, would be methodical and complete. But as Adebayo stood in that church, watching police lead away the woman he'd planned to marry, he felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just an enormous, hollow exhaustion. He'd won, certainly. He'd protected himself, exposed the deception, ensured consequences for those who tried to destroy him. But the victory felt like ashes. His mother found him afterward, still in his wedding suit, sitting alone in the empty chapel. She didn't speak immediately, just sat beside him, her presence solid and warm. Eventually, she took his hand. You did what needed to be done, she said quietly. That doesn't mean it won't hurt. I loved her, Mama, Adebayo admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Or I loved who I thought she was. How do I trust that again? How do I trust anyone again? His mother was quiet for a long moment before answering. You learn to trust yourself first. To trust your instincts instead of dismissing them. To trust that you're strong enough to survive even the worst betrayals, because you just did. Over the following months, Adebayo rebuilt. Not just his security protocols or his business safeguards, though those were certainly reinforced. He rebuilt his understanding of love, of trust, of the difference between genuine connection and careful performance. He learned to listen to the quiet warnings he dismissed before. He learned that sometimes protecting your heart means being willing to walk away, even when every part of you wants to believe the beautiful lie. 2 years after that day in the chapel, Adebayo met someone new. Not at a gala or through a business connection, but in the most ordinary way, in a bookstore, reaching for the same title, laughing at the coincidence. Her name was Yetund. She was a teacher, practical and grounded, with none of Folklare's calculated glamour. When she smiled, it was spontaneous and genuine. When she spoke about her life, the details were unpolished and real. Their relationship grew slowly, carefully, built on accumulated truth rather than immediate passion. And when Adebayo finally told her what had happened with Folklore, about the blindness real and performed, about the betrayal that had nearly destroyed him, Yetund simply listened. She didn't try to fix it or dismiss it. She just heard him. I can see you, Adebayo told her one evening, the words carrying weight she immediately understood. Really see you. And you see me. The real me, not the version someone might want to manipulate or control. That's all love should ever be, Yetund replied. Two people seeing each other clearly and choosing each other anyway. Sometimes the cruelest lessons are the most valuable. Sometimes we need to lose everything we thought we wanted to discover what we actually need. And sometimes, seeing clearly means accepting that the most beautiful surfaces can hide the darkest intentions. But it also means recognizing genuine light when it finally appears, and having the wisdom, earned through pain, to appreciate it fully. Adebayo learned that vision isn't just about what your eyes can perceive. It's about what your heart is willing to acknowledge. And real blindness isn't losing your sight, it's refusing to see the truth even when it's right in front of you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments what part spoke to you the most. And if you thought this one was powerful, wait till you hear the next story we're working on.